Let's start the timer. And everything looks good. Hello.
Hey.
How are you doing?
I'm good. Excited.
What's your name?
I'm Meiraf. Meiraf Zacharias.
Nice to meet you, Meiraf. Where are you from?
So that's an interesting question for me to answer. My family is from Ethiopia, so I am first generation Ethiopian-American. I grew up on the East Coast in quite a few different places. I was born in Washington, D.C., grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, including Northern Virginia and parts of Maryland. But I moved to North Carolina in high school, so I did high school and college, actually, in North Carolina. So I consider all of those places home.
So where you went to high school in North Carolina?
I did half of high school in North Carolina and half of it in Maryland, so I had 2 high schools.
Wow. Which did you like better, North Carolina or Maryland? Which do you think of more fondly?
I think I honestly consider North Carolina in high school a little more fondly than I do high school in Maryland. But then college in North Carolina was a little bit more difficult. I don't know if that was just the stuff that comes along with high school versus college, but my high school in North Carolina was very small. I lived on an island, actually, off of North Carolina. So going from a high school that was roughly 2,500 kids to a high school that had about 30 kids was really different. My graduating class went from 465 to 9.
Wow.
So high school was fond, and I loved the island. I loved the people that I met there and everything that happened there. But North Carolina in college was a little bit more loaded.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think that is?
I think that I went to college and didn't want to be there. And I didn't want to be there the whole time I was there. But I stayed there, even at times when I shouldn't have. And that led me to just, I don't know, be in relationships that weren't exactly to my highest good. And also just when you resent being in a place, I think that you lose your fondness for it.
Mm-hmm.
It was also a different part of North Carolina, so it was still the coast, but it was mainland, and it was a little bit more of a college town. It didn't have the same kind of bohemian, lax feel that the island did. And I think that was just a little bit difficult.
Mm-hmm.
With people being less understanding of different trains of thought and ideas of how the world can work.
And then how old were you when you came out to California?
I moved to California at 21.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I finished college. So I finished college but don't have a degree, which I think also puts a lot of weight on my situation with the college. I don't have a degree because of a lot of just random bureaucratic stuff that I had to go through. But I moved out here after that because without having a degree, my post-grad plans fell through. I had originally planned on going to a graduate school in Spain and had been accepted and already had an apartment and was ready for all of those things, but without the degree, you can't really go. So I had to change those decisions, and so I moved out here. My family was here at that time, so I moved out here to be closer to them because it's difficult to be 3,000 miles away from people that can help you make decisions if you don't know what you're doing and you're that far. So moved out here, and decided to figure it out one day at a time.
And how long has it been, you said?
I've been here for about 2 years.
2 years.
A
Not
little
that
over
long
2
at
years.
all.
No, not that long.
Do you like it?
I enjoy it. I think that it definitely has stuff that I enjoy. I think that I meet interesting and creative people on a regular basis. I think that I have the option of being in a really big city situation, but I can also get away to do something a little bit smaller if I really wanted to, which is nice. There's a lot of versatility in the area and in the people, and there's also just a lot of difference in everything. Like, even just going from Berkeley to Oakland, it's very different things on a regular basis, and that includes the people and the things that you can do and the foods that you can eat, which is exciting.
Do you see yourself staying here?
No, I don't. I don't really see myself staying anywhere. That idea is always really difficult for me, the idea of roots and staying somewhere. But this isn't a bad place to be. It's not that anything has happened or that I don't like it. It's just, I don't think I've found a place or a reason to be stationary just quite yet. So I'd come back.
Where do you think you might go to?
All over is the hope, right? I don't know. I'm looking at moving to Washington, the Seattle area, in the near future. But that I can't even see being for too long. Just, again, the staying still is not really something I'm good at.
Washington State.
Washington State.
Have you been there before?
I have visited a few times just to see what's up there. My boyfriend's family is up there, and he's from up there, and he's currently back there. So, you know, I've been up there to visit and do those things, and so right now the idea is that I'll move up there.
Oh. So when you went to visit, did it feel, because you've been in so many different places, did it feel like desirable, like it had a lot of things that you felt like you like in a city or in a place?
Yeah, I think that it has a lot of the things that you look for when you're looking for somewhere that you could live. There's stuff to do, you're close to things, it's accessible, it's, I think for me, I like the idea of either being completely isolated, like the island was really nice and it was so far from everything, or I kind of like the idea of being in the center of a city, and being in Washington, D.C. was amazing. And I think that the Seattle area, or like where I was in Washington State, would be somewhere like this, kind of in between. Like, I'd have the ability to go see a city. Like, you could just go into Seattle proper and see the city, or you could go into somewhere a little bit more remote and go camping, which could also be nice. So yeah, I mean, I could see myself being there. But again, nothing long-term, nothing committed.
Does your boyfriend live more in the city or more outside of the city?
He lives in a suburb of Seattle, so it has its own downtown. It's similar to the idea of, I'd probably consider it like a Berkeley to San Francisco. Like, you can get into Seattle very easily from there, but Berkeley has its own downtown. It has its own bustle, thing. And yeah.
Well, that's cool. How long have you been with your boyfriend?
We have been together a little over a year.
A little over a year.
A little over a year. The timeline's always iffy. Just we'd known each other for a while, so a little bit longer than that, so lines blur as to when things started and when they didn't.
Do you see yourself finishing school and perhaps going back to do the thing in Spain?
That has been on my mind a lot. I think that the graduate program that I was looking at was something that I was interested in at the time, and I'm not quite sure I would still want to go do that program. So my undergraduate degree would have been in sociology. It would have been a Bachelor in Arts in sociology, and I minored in Spanish. So the graduate program was actually a master's degree in a study of diverse democracies. So it would have been with a focus in developing public policy in nations that have very diverse democracies versus those that have super homogenous populations. So sort of how...
What's an example of a place that has like very homogenous democracy?
Basically, I was actually in Southeast Asia this summer, and like countries like Vietnam and Cambodia and stuff, their populations are primarily people that are Vietnamese that happen to be of Vietnamese lineage for quite some time. And then my family being Ethiopian, Ethiopia is a country that most of the people that live there are Ethiopian, and they have been Ethiopian for most of their lives. Of course, every country now has some sort of immigrant situation, but this was kind of just comparing countries like the United States and some countries in Europe, like England and some North African countries, not really that many, but countries that have really, really diverse people that live there, and they have people from everywhere, and how it's difficult to create public policy when not everyone's thinking is exactly the same. So, and they don't come from the same history, and so it's difficult to create laws for people that see things just a little bit differently. I think that when it boils down to it, I think morals are pretty much the same across the board. But it does become a little harder when the population is so diverse. People really like us and them, not distinction between people. And so in places where it's more homogenous, there is a little less of that because it's harder to just decide who is us and who is them. But yeah, it would have been a really interesting program. I'm not really quite sure I want to go into something like that anymore, but I'm currently working with my undergraduate university to complete my degree. So I may actually have that done in the next few months.
Oh, cool.
Which would be exciting. Just basically to have it. At this point, I don't really use it.
And you studied, so you studied sociology as an undergrad.
Yes.
What attracted you to that?
I had an amazing professor for an elective course my freshman year, and the class was Modern Social Problems, which was a sociology elective, and he was a really great professor, and the course itself was really interesting. I think that, like I said, we like the idea of us and them, and I like studying that and how we divide ourselves up from one another is really interesting, and those divisions really affect how we process and how we do all sorts of things, and I found that really interesting. And it's strange to see how many of those distinctions or those decisions that we make are based in historical divisions. And not even just, the ones that we can think of off the top of our heads, but it's easy to just decide that someone is different, so they're other. And that's, constantly relevant. It's not something that's going away anytime soon.
Yeah, it seems like that. In many different countries. Why do you think that is? Why does that seem like something that's so persistent in various cultures? That there's a desire to want to separate according to us versus them?
It's instinctual. It is something. It's what keeps us. It's what kept us alive, especially in the past. When you think of a time when we were basically hunter-gatherers, and if another tribe invaded, they took all of your things. And so you had to be able to distinguish what was your tribe and what was another tribe. And that was just survival. And that those divisions kind of came about from more of like a familial basis. Like, it was based on who your family was. And then that broadened into the idea of race and ethnicity, which is an argument that people will have for the rest of time. But I think that's where they stem from. And it just, as our lives have strayed away from hunting and gathering, and now we all kind of just count beans or push paper, we still have to figure out what is us and what is them, just because it is instinctual. It's what we do. And those divisions are fine. I don't think that we're trying to keep ourselves safe anymore, but a lot of those divisions are made with that as the reason, as true as it may or may not be.
Was the program that you were studying about finding ways to kind of bridge those gaps so that people were able to work together more and have a more functioning democracy?
So the program that I was looking into was definitely more about how you take those differences that are seen and how we take those differences to help create public policy and laws and all of those things. And I think that its idea was to create a lot more people that could function in sort of like a UN sort of situation and be able to help countries come together, just create safer places for diverse populations, just so that people feel safe to be in a country that isn't necessarily historically their own, but that they can make their own.
What do you think you might do once you get your degree, and then now you do have the option to go to graduate school if you wanted to?
I don't really know. I think that having my degree would be nice, just because I could then I could travel, and most countries will let you teach English in other country as long as you have a degree, because it kind of proves that you've been able to do something. And that's basically what I think I'm seeing now. It would give me a way to travel in an easier way. I don't really see myself staying in a situation where I would do something along those lines. I think that I'm focusing more on things that challenge me in different ways, like possibly starting my own business. But
I'm gonna feed them really quick. I'm just gonna leave everything rolling. I think that they'll settle once they eat.
Sounds good.
What kind of business do you think you would like to start?
I have a really nice idea and plan, but not sure how I'm actually going to put it into motion, but I'm trying to open a bar and possibly a restaurant. So, big ideas.
Mm-hmm. Would it have a theme, or like what would the food be?
The bar concept is more taking a paired tapas kind of approach to a bar, so kind of doing like a paired drink and snack situation. But the restaurant, I really want to bring Ethiopian food to an elevated level. I think that a lot of people like Ethiopian food, and I think it's definitely an accessible food, and it's easy for most people to eat it once you get there. But I think it's kind of held in the same place as like Indian food. It's kind of something that you just like get as like takeout, or you just go and you sit and eat with your friends. But I think that it's techniques and its flavors that have been really thought about for a really long time, and so it should be held to a really high standard. And I kind of want to do like elevated Ethiopian food.
That's cool. I really like Ethiopian food, but I feel like I haven't experimented that much with it. I feel like mostly when I go, I eat mostly like the vegetarian options. What kind of stuff do you feel like would be more elevated?
I think that it would just be more from taking the food that already exists and presenting it in a way that is like with a little more care in its presentation, like kind of giving the like 4 or 5 star like Michelin star level restaurant plating, and just more creative ways of eating these flavors. So as opposed to just being, because as it is now, it's similar to Indian food in that it's a bunch of sauces and a bread, and you kind of eat with your hands. So just maybe taking those sauces and creating a more interesting way to taste those flavors and to get into Ethiopian food, and seeing how it's a really interesting cuisine that's a lot like other cuisines. It's been touched by so many different cultures but it is inherently Ethiopian, with Ethiopia being one of the few countries that was never invaded but never colonized in Africa. It's really interesting that
Is it the only country?
In Africa, I want to say yes. I believe that there might be one other country in Africa that was not colonized, so I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but it's definitely in the minority. But
why do you think that is? Not to derail your train of thought.
I have no idea. It was invaded a few times. There was the Italian invasion during World War II. There was, I think, a bunch of people have tried to get in there, and there's a bunch of natural resources in the country itself, but it hasn't been invaded, and I think that has a lot to do with just, it's a really old country. It's really old, and it has its own, there's a lot of respect in that history, and not to say that other countries don't respect their history, but I think that it delves so deep into the country as a whole, though it's broken up into a lot of tribes. So there are different tribes in Ethiopia, and so people can be of a different subculture within the Ethiopian culture. But there's this inherent Ethiopianness about people, and there's a lot of pride in that, and I think that family is a really big thing in Ethiopia. It's it's basically everything for most people, and I think that they've allowed for that to be more important than just the division of tribes. So though there have been, small wars between the tribes, which is basically how the country of Eritrea kind of came about, because of its own historical past. But I think that there's a lot of pride in being Ethiopian. There's a lot of pride in that, so they tried to just hold it down.
Mm-hmm.
It's not because I mean, as far as I know, I don't think the military was extraordinary by any means.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think they did a good job, and they liked what they were doing. So they did it, and they've continued to do it for as long as they could.
Have you been before?
I have. I've been a few times. A lot of my family is still there. My grandparents on my mother's side are still there. My grandfather passed last year, so his body is there. But and then I have an aunt who's there half of the year, and in Los Angeles for the other half. But I do have quite a bit of family that's still there. And I've been a few times, mainly just to go see family. But there was one summer that I went, and at that point my family owned a hotel in the area, so I helped work in the front desk because I fluently speak English, which helps. But yeah, it's an interesting country. I think that it's definitely easy. I think for me it was nice because my family was there. But I know that a lot of people like it as more of a touristy destination. It's a different kind of place.
When you were working at the hotel, do you feel like you saw like a certain nationality or group of people more than others? Like, is it like popular with like Germans or French or Americans or?
While I was there, it was a lot of Ethiopian clientele, but then there was also quite a few people from like Saudi Arabia, as well as there was actually a pretty big. There were quite a few people that were there from Germany as well as the UK. I was there during a time when the World Health Organization was there. They were holding some sort of conference, and so I think that could explain why there was a decent European presence there. But I definitely think that I saw a few more German people than I did people from England. Italians are there a little bit, and a lot of Ethiopians speak Italian, especially, like I said, because of the invasion. Some people are half Italian. Some people are, there's a little bit of Italian blood. And it's interesting. It's kind of just, there's this understanding of all of these other cultures, but there's being there from the United States, it was weird because it is, like I said, another homogenous population. So it's weird because you get there and it's basically just you're out in public and you hear the same language everywhere. And even here, that's not very common. Like, you walk down the street and you'll hear conversations in other languages. Just
Sure.
A lot of them would be in English. Probably most of the transactions that you encounter on a day-to-day basis are all in English. But as you walk down the street, people are having conversations in Korean, Vietnamese, Spanish, parts of Oakland, Amharic, which is Ethiopian. So it's diverse so that everything's a little bit different. And when you get to somewhere that isn't like that, it can feel a little weird, even if you are in on the joke, basically. Like, it's not that you don't understand the language. It's not like you went to a foreign country where you don't understand anything, but it is weird that you look like everybody else and you sound like everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
That can be a little weird.
What do you do for work?
I currently work at a coffee shop. I work at a Pete's Coffee, so I make coffee in the mornings, and I wait tables at night. And I like both of those things. I've done them both on and off for quite some time. Um, I think that I really enjoy customer service, as exhausting as it is. I like making people's day better a little bit as much as I can. And I think that I have the ability to do that in my interactions with hundreds of people every day.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I do now. I mean, I know that if I do open a bar or restaurant, I will essentially be waiting tables in a different way for possibly the rest of my life. But, yeah, that's what I do.
What's the best job you've ever had?
The best, the best job that I've ever had was probably I would have to say that the best job I ever had was probably working in the hotel, because it was super easy, and I know that it was a family gig, and it probably doesn't really count, but my hours were really lax. My responsibilities were pretty easy, and I was pretty young. I was about 17, but I felt important. I felt like what I was doing was important, which was really nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It seems like that would be really cool to be you're being exposed to so many different cultures too. That seems like that would be really interesting. It seems interesting to work around travelers, people that are constantly coming in and coming out.
I always thought it would be interesting to work at like an airport.
Mm-hmm. What was the worst job you've ever had?
For a while I was in this weird in-between place, while I was not really in college but still in my college town, I worked at a state-funded childcare center.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just really hard. I worked so the childcare center was 24 hours, which is kind of a crazy concept if you think about it. So it was a daycare that was open 24 hours out of the day. And I used to work the shift from 5 a.m. till about noon.
Wow.
Yeah.
Early morning.
It was pretty early. And then, and my class was a bunch of 2 and 3-year-olds. It was really hard because it would be 5 o'clock in the morning. I'd be getting to work, and there would be people that were just picking their kids up because they worked all night and they can't leave their kids at home. And with it being a state-run childcare service, I saw a lot of families that were deeply impoverished, and I don't know, I've worked in childcare on and off since I was 13. I've done like the home babysitting and the nannying, and I also worked at a camp from the time that I was 14. So I've been taking care of other people's kids for almost half my life. And it was really hard to watch kids that without the center wouldn't eat more than once a day, maybe. And it was not from a place of not being loved at home, but it just, you can see how poverty can affect what people can and can't give to their children. And you can also see that, like, the problems with the workforce and how it doesn't really allow you to raise children in the United States. Because here are people that have children and have to work so hard to take care of these children, that to the point that they don't get to see their kids. Because their kids would basically be at the childcare center all night, and then in the morning their parents would pick them up and then take them to school, and then they wouldn't see them all day, and then they would then pick them up from school, drop them off at the childcare center. So it was just this like constant loop of only seeing your child for about 2 hours a day. And it was hard just doing, like, it wasn't that the actual position was difficult, it was more what you saw on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
There were quite a few instances that, like, social workers would come in to pick kids up, and it was just hard.
Social workers like to come and, like, take them away?
Yeah.
Wow.
To come and, like, it would be really sad. We had one instance where there was this one family that had 6 kids in a child care center, and sometimes a social worker would come and only pick up 2 of the kids, and you would have to watch all the kids say bye to each other. And they were kind of not okay with it, but it was kind of just like a cycle that they have known, and it wasn't surprising to them. They've done it before. And that was really hard to watch.
When you were there, did you think about just like what could be done to make this easier for people, or to make a better system for people so that this isn't how things are working?
I mean, yeah, you always think about like how lives could be made easier, but it's difficult to think about practical ways that all of that, like, there's just so much reform that would have to happen. And I think that we'd all have to make different changes, like we'd all have to come up with something else as a society to not have that be a problem. But I think that that's a lot of change that I don't know if everyone is willing to make.
Do you feel like that desire exists, like politically in this country, where people want that?
I think that everyone wants life to be easier, and I think that no one wants to watch a child suffer, and no one wants family life to be difficult. But I think that a lot of those changes aren't going to be made by just not liking them. And I think that a lot of people don't want to make the sacrifice if it's not their problem.
Yeah. Even
if it is for something like taking care of a child. And I know that sounds awful, but I think that inherently if it's not really our problem, we don't always want to deal with it. And
kind of us versus them again.
Kind of us versus them all over again. It's, you can see a family and you can say, oh, I would never want my children to feel that way. I want things to get better for them, but saying that is a lot easier than doing something for that family. Or even if it's something as small as, we're not going to go out twice a week and I'll donate that to a women and children's center. Like, even if it's something as small as that, people don't want to make the sacrifices for a problem that isn't theirs.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that you feel like there's a lot of pride that people have in Ethiopia about the history and the culture of being Ethiopian. Do you feel like you see that here in the United States? Do you feel like there's like pride in the history of the United States and the culture?
Yes and no. I think that, I mean, it's a running joke that, like, patriotism is, like, this huge thing in the United States. I mean, even other countries' movies portray Americans as just running around yelling, USA, USA all the time. So, but I think that there's a difference in just being strangely proud and being from a country and, like, really taking deep pride and interest in your history. Like, most people in Ethiopia can tell you every single Ethiopian Orthodox feast day. They can tell you the history of it. They can probably give you an actual historical breakdown of the lineage of all the kings in order. They could probably tell you some, like, there's an actual knowledge behind that pride. And it is a very old culture. It's not, you know, the United States is sitting at right around 200 and or such years, something like that, being a country. And I think that it's very different than a country that's been around for a very long time.
Oh, no. He's really funny. I don't know what his deal is. He seems to do this after dinner, where then he gets upset. So then sometimes I feel like I want to comfort him, and he'll do the same thing, where then he'll get mad. And so it's just like, what do you want? You're not hungry. I don't know what you want.
But yeah, so I think it's a different kind of pride. I think, yeah.
What is something that you would like to see or do before you die?
Just one. Something I would like to see or do before I die. I would love to go bungee jumping. And I know that sounds absolutely insane, but bungee jumping or like cliff diving, I have this really huge fear of falling and heights. And I think that is deeply intermingled with my fear of not being in control of things. So I think that it would just be a really good mental, spiritual practice to just jump off of something and not be in control of whether or not gravity takes control of the situation. So,
have you ever known anyone that's done that before?
Bungee jumped, and yeah, I have a bunch of friends that have done that, and I have a lot of family. Well, my uncle is in the Army, and he was airborne, so he would jump out of planes for a really long time, and he actually, to the point where he now instructs people in the Army on how to do it. And I would do skydiving. Something like that would be really, really interesting. But the closest I've been is I've been parasailing, and that's baby stuff. Like, you're strapped in and you're basically just like up in the air, and then you come down really soft. It's still really controlled.
But you're pretty high up there, aren't you?
Yeah, but there's no loss of control in that. It's not a jump. It's not a fall.
Yeah.
It's not a trust exercise.
How do you get up? Are you like on skis or something, or how does that work?
You're in the boat. So you start off in a boat, you go out into the middle of the water, and then at the edge of the boat, they clip you into like a harness, and the harness is like attached to this huge parachute thing. And then they start to just pull, like the boat goes out, and as the boat goes out, you start going up, and then they let out more and more rope, basically, until you're up as far as you want. And they can also, like, there's varying heights. Like, some of them will let you go up a certain amount and then, like, further up. And, yeah, that's really fun. That I think people should do.
How long do they keep you up there for?
You're up there for, like, 20-ish minutes or so, maybe a little longer.
A little while.
Yeah, it's a good amount of time. You know you're up there. It's not a brief thing.
Is there somewhere that you would like to go to or possibly even to live?
I would really like to go to Morocco. I think that Morocco would be a lot of fun. I think that it's such a... I think that it just looks beautiful, one, aesthetically. And then I think that there's just so much cultural mixing that's happened there that it's such an interesting place to be. I think that could be said about a lot of countries in North Africa, but that primarily. I would really love to go to Carnival in Brazil. I think that would be a lot of fun. Just a huge cultural party that's just like bright and flashy and beautiful.
Have you been anywhere that's equivalent to that, like a big crazy like outdoor kind of parade, kind of a festival?
No, I mean, like, I've been to like smaller parades, but nothing that I would consider to that level. But I'd love to, like that, or like Chinese New Year would be really fun. That'd be another one that I'd probably go to.
Do you have children?
No. I consider my little sister my child. I think that she has a big part in me growing up, and I have a big part in raising her. So I jokingly refer to her as my child. Not even remotely close enough to be her mom. We're 4 years apart. That would be a biological miracle. But no, I don't have any children. I think that I'm barely responsible enough to take care of myself. Nonetheless, other people. So.
Do you get along with your sister?
Yeah. We didn't, obviously. I mean, when you're younger, you and your siblings just beat on each other. But we've gotten to a place where we're kind of, I think it just, we're close enough in age that now those 4 years don't really matter. Whereas, you know, when you're 7 and 11, that's a huge difference. Like, you guys have nothing in common. But now we're 19 and 23, so a lot of our trials and tribulations are similar, but we get along a lot better now. We're probably up there in the best friends situation, but she'd probably not say it.
Do you feel like your personalities are mostly similar or mostly different?
I think they're mostly different. I think that we seem similar to other people, but I think that that's because we've spent our whole lives together. So I think that our senses of humor can be kind of similar. I think that we speak similarly and things like that, but we are inherently very different people.
How so?
My mom likes to say that my heart is very big, and I will stay in situations of extreme discomfort to make sure that no one else feels uncomfortable. Whereas my sister, if nothing is to her standards, she will pitch a fit. And that's one huge difference. Like, I can make decisions for other people, like, for the benefit of other people. Whereas my sister is there for herself and can take care of herself, and it's very different. And I think that we have a lot to learn from each other. I think that there's a lot that I can learn about, like, self-care from her, and I think there's a lot that she could learn about caring about other people and being considerate of the people around her from me. So I think that if we met somewhere in the middle, we'd be the perfect person. But
Do you have any other brothers and sisters?
it is just the two of us.
Just the two of you. Do you get along with your mother and father?
So my biological father is not really in my life. That whole relationship has been rocky from the very beginning. My parents got divorced when I was probably 6 or 7, and so when I was younger, we would kind of see my dad on the weekends, and that was always just really difficult because he didn't really know how to. I know that my dad loves me, obviously, but there were just, the way that he would approach certain things would just kind of come off as aggressive or not really supportive. And so at one point, I kind of passive-aggressively stopped communicating with him. And then when I was about 18, I decided to try to put that relationship back together again because I think it would be really cool to have a dad. And so I tried, and I came at it from the perspective of being an adult, and it kind of just blew up in my face. And so I let that go. So I haven't really spoken to my father since, I don't know, I'd probably say about 4 years now. Haven't spoken to my father. My mom and I are super close. My mom and my sister are very similar people, so they understand each other a lot better. And I think that my mom and I, though we are really close, we butt heads a lot because she doesn't really know how to approach my way of thought. But when it comes to my sister, she gets it because they're basically clones of each other. So we butt heads all the time, my mom and I, but she's great, and I don't know. I mean, obviously I wouldn't be alive without her, but I wouldn't be the same person without her. I am pretty close to my stepdad. He's a pretty new addition into my family. I think that he has been around for about 5 years. My mom and my stepdad got married about 3 years ago, though. But he's pretty great.
Would you do me a favor and maybe hold him?
Yeah. Murray, come here.
I think he'll settle. Maybe he just wants to be pet or something. I'm not sure. Okay, sorry.
No. So we're pretty good, my stepdad and I, because I think that he, from the beginning, has seen that I've always been a little black sheepy in the family, and it's nice that he is so separate from this weird triad that is the 3 women of my family. So he'll, like, see it from an outside perspective, which is nice, and he gives good advice, and he's a pretty cool guy in general.
That's cool. What's your favorite thing to do?
Right now, with the hours that I'm working, my favorite thing to do is sleep, but realistically, I enjoy eating. Like, I like going to really cool restaurants. I like trying new recipes. I like baking. I like cooking. I enjoy spending time with friends. Not even, like, in a big way. Like, I'm not a huge party or, like, club goer, but, like, I would much rather sit at a bar and have a drink and have a really nice conversation, or, like, have a bottle of wine at someone's house and just have a really good chat. I like I like connecting with people, whether it's conversation or food, but I think that's what I like.
Do you like movies?
I like movies. I think that I like movies in all of the ways that a person could like movies. I think that I like them because they're super cheesy and there's like this weird like sappy thing that you can do when you're watching a movie. I think that I like movies um from an entertainment perspective. Like I like just sitting there and being entertained, which is why I think I can watch a lot of things like the blockbusters that aren't like terribly cinematic greats. But I also really like movies as like art. Like I think that I could sit there and watch a movie and walk out and be like, I don't know that I would ever watch that again, but I like that I saw it.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that it made me feel the things that I felt, and I like that that's how that person decided to express the things that they wanted to express. Um, I I think that I like movies the same way that I like just connecting with people. I think that I like seeing how other people have chosen to connect with the outside world.
Mm-hmm. What's one of the best movies you've seen recently?
Well, recently, I think the best movie I've seen was probably Mother. That was really really good. I think that it was done really well. It made me feel really uncomfortable. I wanted to leave most of the movie, but I think that that's what it was going for.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if something can make me so uncomfortable, I want to peel all of my skin off. It has made me feel something, and it's made me feel something really well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that is probably recently one of the best movies I've ever seen. But ever, there's there are a few other movies. It's a pretty short list, but
Like what?
I would have to say that Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is a phenomenal movie. I think that it captures so many different dimensions to just two people trying to be two people and then trying to be in a relationship,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is super important. And that was really great. And then also Blue Jasmine was a phenomenal movie. Just, I think it was crazy to watch someone just fall apart,
Mm-hmm.
but done really artfully. And then I think the movie adaptation of August, Osage County, was amazing.
Oh, I'm not familiar with that movie.
That is something that everyone should watch.
What's it about?
So it is based off of a play that is based off of a poem, and it's basically about this super dysfunctional family in Oklahoma. Yeah, Oklahoma, definitely. And basically they're all getting together because the patriarch of the family he's died.
Mm-hmm.
And he's died under some very interesting circumstances. Like there's questions as to how he died, and yeah, I'm gonna try to do this without saying the plot of the movie. And basically, you just have to watch this family be extremely dysfunctional, and just they have to unravel all of these problems and lies that no one has addressed. And I think that it's wonderfully acted. I think that people did really well being in it. It has a great cast.
I'll have to check it out. Is there anyone in it that's like a famous actor?
Oh, yeah. So Julia Roberts is in there.
Oh, okay.
Meryl Streep.
Mm-hmm.
Abigail Breslin is in it.
Oh, okay. So it was like within the last 10 years?
Oh, yeah. It was like probably like the movie came out, I want to say probably like 5 years ago, because Abigail Breslin is still a teenager in that movie, so it couldn't have been that far back. So not as far back as like Little Miss Sunshine, but
Mm-hmm. All right, you can turn that off. There's a little black switch on the right. Okay, the final question that I like to ask people is if you could tell future Americans, future American women, future American people some kind of insight or advice or something to think about, in the future, what would you tell people?
I think that my biggest thing is I just want people to think more intersectionally. Like, I think that everyone's life is difficult. And I know that we have a lot of, I think that now, especially, people like to say that if you're a straight, cis white male, like, your life should be really easy. And I don't think that's fair. I don't think it's true. I don't think that inherently makes, I don't think that that makes your life easy. I think that it does allow you to have less pushback. I think that there are a few more open doors, but I don't think that that means that your life is easy. I don't think that doesn't mean, it doesn't mean that you won't face hardship. And in that same vein, I think that there's a problem where people will, like, black men don't see the problem that white women face. Like, that's another thing. It's like, yes, I get that she happens to be white, and yes, that happens to be a quote unquote easier race to be, but that doesn't mean that being a woman isn't difficult. And I think that in that same vein, white women don't see that being a black woman is difficult. Yes, we're both women, but there is now this added dimension of being black. And then there's the whole queer identity thing, and that's a whole nother dimension. I think that just being aware that everyone is fighting a battle, and it's great that you're fighting for causes, but be aware of the other causes, and none of them are more relevant than others, and everyone should just be fair. It's easier said than done, but yeah.
Well, very good. Well, thank you very much.
Of course. Puppy, you feel better now that someone